This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode number 138. Hello,
Hooray!
Tim.
How you doing? How you doing?
Woohoo.
I'm back in Florida, but I'm not in Miami with Rat this time. I'm on the west coast of Florida, Southwest. So this is I had some little exotic adventures today. Sanibel Island, Captiva, which where Rob Rauschenberg used to live. It's like jungle. It's like hanging in the jungle. It's fun.
Wonderful. Well, I'm in my usual disappearance zone in my salon, also known as the Museum of Myself, enjoying myself completely.
You should be. Yes.
I have to.
As you do.
As enjoyment is my rebellion, especially because what the hell is going on now? This is so ridiculous. Just when you think things can't get any more ridiculous, here we go. I mean, it boggles the mind, because I don't even know where to begin. And so I'm just going to begin with something so ridiculous
please.
That addresses the situation. Now,
sure.
I can't remember exactly where this report came out, but I read that the U.S. government has been advising Americans to social distance during a possible nuclear attack.
Oh, my God.
According to a bulletin that was obtained a few days ago, individuals are told to get inside the nearest building. I mean, avoid radiation, remove contaminated clothing.
Okay.
That would have come in contact with debris from the fallout. Go to the basement or the middle of the building. Stay away from the outer walls and roofs. Try to maintain a distance of at least 6 feet between yourself and people who are not part of your household. And if possible, wear a mask if you're sheltering with people who are not part of your household. Pending further instructions, individuals are told to remain indoors for 24 hours. Oh, that's really going to do the trick. And continue to practice social distancing by wearing a mask and keeping a distance of 6 feet. Of course, the bulletin makes an exception to the rules for children under 2 years old and people who have trouble breathing, and those who are unable to remove masks on their own.
I mean, if a nuke goes off, I mean, I don't know.
It reminds me.
Orders is going to be. It reminds me of what.
It reminds me of when they'd have school drills. Oh, get under your desk.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
My word.
I mean, my mom was reminding, or she told me when she was in college in the late 50s, early 60s, or right around that time. When was the Cuban Missile Crisis exactly? That was 62. I don't know. Anyhow, well, one of her roommates' father was a doctor, and he had sent her suicide pills in case the missiles were on their way, and she just killed herself. I think she asked for them, of course. It never happened. She didn't have to kill herself, but things are really insane right now. It just
there's
keeps
just
on
no
going.
reason. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. But here we are, because most politics don't make sense. We have either, demented ass clowns. We have people on the verge of Alzheimer. We have madmen who've been in lockdown who think the world is theirs. I don't know where we're going with this.
Did you see the State of the Union last night?
No. Did you?
Yeah, I saw excerpts. It was, Biden's so unpopular. I mean, he really had a pretty bad year. Like, he had the House, the Senate, and the White House. And basically, I mean, yes, there's lots of obstruction. There's also a lot of obstruction within the Democratic Party. But at the end of the day, he wasn't very successful. And he kind of ran, when you would go against progressives and you basically try to get, unify the Democratic Party. He's like, oh, the progressives talk such a good game, but can they get things done? It's like, buddy,
hello.
You can't get shit done. So basically the State of the Union was mostly Ukrainian war, because his polls with how he's handling it now, of course, how he's handled it up until now, he's been involved with why we're in this crisis. But how he's handling it now, the EU's everyone's kind of unifying against Russia for the most part globally. So he's just basically like trying to wave that flag, like, look, we're all unified, and I'm the leader here, and we all hate Putin. So the whole thing is pathetic. I don't know what to say.
No, it's flummoxing. There's what is the solution? Start again with everything. I mean, all right. Well, go ahead.
So RT, which I get it. It's a propaganda tool for Russia.
Well, but there are some good shows
on there, and fine. You're never going to see them criticize Russia, and you have to just go into it knowing that. but their criticisms of other countries and other institutions is often very correct. So if you know how to basically sift through the propaganda, just like, well, any media anywhere, if you know how to sift through the propaganda and take what you can from it, I mean, it's kind of informative. But yeah, it's banned in Europe. It's banned right now, even on the YouTube stations there. It's banned, I think, here in the United States, but not on the YouTube station. So you still can kind of see it.
I mean, and you can't paint the whole channel, because there are some valid shows. I myself like the Young Turks Network.
Sure.
You know, there's some really good dialogues on that. Anyway, something equally as ridiculous as 6 feet apart and wear a mask in case of a nuclear fallout. Those protesting in front of the New Zealand Parliament are increasingly reporting symptoms, kind of like the Havana syndrome, of illness, and they're linking it to a conspiracy theory that the government is making them sick with radiation poisoning. Now, the theory has gained so much traction in the protest crowd that one of the leading organizers, Leighton Baker, posted a social media video trying to debunk it, even as some believers began wearing tin foil hats as protection. Baker told the New Zealand Herald that he posted the video to assure people that they're not suffering the ill effects as a result of radiation weapon. Instead, he said it was the consequence of people camping around the parliament and I also believe this, the constant bombardment surrounded by cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth at a higher rate than what they are accustomed to. I mean, it's all basically electrical radiation, microwaves. It's all still damaging rays to the human form. And there's currently a photograph of a number of people at the protest in Wellington wearing these homemade tinfoil hats. Unbelievable.
Well, Wellington's, we played Wellington once.
The question is, people don't know if it's just a parody or, let's face it, there's a lot of dummies out there.
No one knows we don't know what any of this is.
What's worse, a MAGA hat or a tinfoil hat? I'm not sure there's a difference.
Yeah. Oh man. I saw a MAGA hat today in Florida, but that's a different story. So this guy, Jamie Sneeden of Alaska, was on his little daily hike when suddenly he was standing on some kind of glacier, and this giant ice chunk that he's standing on just collapsed and fell into the inlet right on the outside of Anchor River. And he just held onto it like a fucking buoy. But the tide or the current was so insane that within no time he was 300 yards just in the middle of fucking nowhere and floating with other ice chunks. He's like, I'm just going to die of hypothermia. Luckily, Shane Balkley, Balkly, fisherman, saw the whole thing, and Jamie's still alive. Yeah, they got him. I mean, what are the chances of that?
For a minute, I was hoping like a SEAL, and I don't mean Navy, floated up and like rode him to safety, but that's my fantasy.
No. If you're in the winter right near Anchorage, Alaska,
I mean, what the hell was he? Wait! What the hell was he doing on a glacier anyway? Ice fishing?
He was doing some mountain rock climbing. These glaciers hang off these things, and hey, maybe he fucked up badly. But
and also look, I mean, you can't blame the guy because there might not be too many glaciers left in the very near future.
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about this. I mean, 20 years ago, you fly back from Europe, say in June. I think we talked about it before, but I'm gonna say it again. Fly back from Europe in June because you're playing whatever. And I'd always kind of lift up the blinds in the airplane on the way back. It's like, because when you're flying over Greenland, you want to check it out. So 20 years ago, every now and then, like the pilot, the captain would be like, hey, if you look out the window, you'll see this giant iceberg floating there in the middle of the Atlantic. And you always check it out like, well, there it is, this little white dot. Now in late June, you open that fucking thing and it's a forest of these fucking things. I mean, these things are melting so fucking quickly. I mean, and yeah, I've witnessed it. I mean, it's insane. But
as ongoing climate talks, just please, people, we have to realize that the complaint always, usually from the Republicans, is, oh, it costs too much to change anything. How much has it been costing, even in the past few years, with all of the devastation, whether it's wildfires, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, from the fact that we're not doing enough if we're doing anything?
I'm glad you bring this up, because if people are paying attention, because of the whole thing with Russia, big oil is going nuts with a whole campaign like, Joe, all your environmental policies, about not drilling in America. They're basically like, saying, we need to be more independent from Russia and all this. They're basically using this, this whole war as an excuse to basically just create environmental global disaster. So I mean, it's people are just so fucking stupid. I mean, why the fuck are we still
absolutely
dependent on gasoline anyways?
Well, and the other thing is this. Let's just talk about petroleum for a minute. Look up petroleum on Wikipedia once. You will not believe how much of everything. How did they even decide to put petroleum in everything, including lipstick? It's in everything.
If you combine everything on the planet that generates money, everything, and you combine all of it and you put it against oil alone, it's still a micro smidgen money, of money earned and whatever. I'm a little inarticulate right now, but yeah, it does nothing touches oil basically money wise. The original, check this out. The original diesel engine was supposed to be run on oils from the crops, whether it's corn. Diesel designed it so farmers could be self-sufficient and run off their own whatever they grow, their own product.
Run on from their run off.
Exactly. And he was mysteriously murdered. Diesel was the guy who did, because he was complaining when they basically converted the engine to receive petroleum instead, or just crude oil or whatever. And so yeah, he was killed. But that's a whole different thing.
This is why, Tim, I'm happy you're in the luxury of a near jungle in Florida. I'm very happy I'm in my disappearance zone, because I don't know what we can do, but although we have to talk about it, I just refuse to be bombarded with the negativity of so much bad news every minute of our existence. Now, that's not to say all activism should stop, but my advice is you have to, when night falls, you have to kind of turn the news off, and you kind of have to return to yourself and your friends and the coven or the community. And you have to take every second that we are not being bombed, that we are not on a floating glacier, attacked by a bear, or even worse, this next story. Now, I mean, there's been a lot of attacks on the New York subway. I myself avoid the subway. There's been so many people pushed onto the tracks. People are hit in the head with hammers, but this one, I think, takes the cake. A Bronx man accused of smearing feces on a woman's face and hair in a vile subway attack last week stuck his tongue out as he was let out of his arraignment hearing. Frank Braqua, 37, was arrested February 28th and charged with forcible touching, menacing, disorderly conduct, and harassment in connection with this stomach churning attack. Wearing a brightly colored Slam magazine cover bomber jacket and an NBA hat, he cursed out the judge during his first appearance at Bronx Criminal Court late Tuesday and said, hurry up, I'm tired of waiting. Get on with this. I want to be handed over to the Brooklyn detectives who are waiting to question him in this hate crime investigation. Now, he had already been freed on bail in 3 other cases and had to face the judge for the attack that took place, 3 days after New York City, you call him a mayor? I don't know what to call him. Eric Adams rolled out the subway safety plan meant to crack down on violence in the crime-ridden transport system. Now, surveillance video from the station that was released by the New York City Police Department shows the victim, described as a 43-year-old woman, just sitting quietly on a bench, waiting for a train. A man, that would be the man with a bag of shit, walks along the platform and suddenly, for no reason, lunges at her and literally shoves the feces all over her face, hair, nose, mouth. And this is all the mayor could come up with. human waste or someone spitting in your face, I'll take the spit,
Yep.
are real signs of mental health issues. And we really must dig in to how we're dealing with these. The thing is, this country has more corporate welfare than they have social services. There's so many homeless. There are so many people that are just.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald Reagan. Thank you, Ronald Reagan, who really slashed the social services with mentally illness.
Right. Mentally empowered people, lack of services, so many people living under the subway. And I don't know if even 1,000 cops are going to help. You can't cover everything at every minute. And right now in New York, with a lot of these people, I mean, this guy was arrested like 44 times.
Yes, he was free on bail. Yeah. You should have said he was free on bile. That was more what was going on.
I mean, it's just, let's face it, we're having, whether or not it's literal, we're having a bucket load of shit dropped on our fucking heads almost every minute of the day at this point in time anyway.
Oh my God.
Praise the goddess. It's usually metaphorical.
I remember about 20 plus years ago in New York, there was a mentally ill person that got arrested going into one of these Korean-owned bodega things, but in Tribeca, one of the fancier ones, and they would have one of those buffets in the middle, and you could just pile on a plate and they weigh it and they, somehow come up with a price. And this guy had a bag of his own waste, and he was just kind of like sneaking around and just kind of siphoning off like little squirts of it into the fucking buffet, and then of course he was caught, and I don't know why he did that, but he was definitely something told him to do it. I mean, he was speaking of
I don't even know what first of all, why the buffets? Second of all,
yes,
ride a bike, forget the subway. This is just so indicative of what's going on in America now. Yeah, there might be a pile of shit dropped on your head around every corner.
I'm gonna take it. It's not just happening in America. There's junk everywhere, including outer space, which they are basically anticipating.
Space junk, space junk.
Space junk is about to collide with the moon, and it's about 3 tons. They know it's this mysterious space junk, and at first they're blaming SpaceX. And then there's more research, and now they're blaming some Chinese rocket and of course the Chinese are denying it. But the thing's about to fucking blast a crater into fucking the moon. Which, if there's like not on top of this, like what happens if that shit snatches into Earth? I mean, so our litter and our feces essentially are it's just everywhere. Well, the human footprint is. And even in outer space.
Well, from outer space to the oceans, we're the center of the shit sandwich.
Yes, and what they say to people, and I'm not in AA, but I've heard it through the grapevine. What they say to people in AA is, if you find yourself eating a shit sandwich, chances are you made it.
Hello, welcome to the world as we know it.
Yes.
So this weekend, I was summoned to read. And it's coming out in a few weeks, Norman Reedus's new book called The Ravaged. And one of the quotes I had to write down was, "Shit travels downhill." And by the way, this is a great book called The Ravaged. Norman Reedus will be out April 5th. We hope to have him on the show soon. But that was just, that's so apropos to what we're talking about now.
We don't know where it's going. I mean, if Putin, though, if he's backed into a corner and he knows that he might just die, I mean, what's going to stop that motherfucker from just like, maybe he gets killed. Russia's got the second biggest nuclear arsenal on the planet. I mean,
he knows he's going to die eventually. So, and this is the problem with madmen or dumb men. It's one or the other, usually in positions of this kind of power. They cannot be trusted. They should not be trusted. We should never have gotten to this position in the first place.
Yeah, well,
and we are at the verge? And I mean, and how about that? Russian soldiers now taking over Chernobyl. Well, go ahead. You can have it. You've already destroyed it. Take it over again.
Well, when Chernobyl went down, we knew about that before most of the Soviet satellite countries and the Russians themselves, the people themselves knew about it, and they were. it was like 4 days later where people in Poland and Czech, because the weather patterns actually brought it to parts of Bavaria and Italy. In fact, they're giving the kids iodine pills. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I wish I could say.
But this is the Chernobyl fact that I love bringing up. I brought it up probably 3 or 4 times, and this goes back to the whole human footprint. The Chernobyl area now is one of the most thriving wildlife refuges in the whole area. There's wolves that hadn't been there for centuries. Things are doing really well. So in other words, a nuke going off is less deadly to species and their existence than human existence in an environment. Humans living there, they can't coexist,
Well, and also, I mean, the average life of any wildlife compared to the average life of humans, which I think for the most part now has gotten too extreme anyway. I mean, people living to 98, I just find it astonishing and kind of horrible. But that's to be taken into consideration too. But anyway, I think we should just I think we should just go into episode number 138. And John Moran, who's had many different lives. Has worn many different hats, and who is a composer, a producer, a director, and is working on his next major opus with Joseph Keckler, which he's going to be producing in Germany in May. Somebody that's worked with Phillip Glass. He's put on shows all over America and Europe. And it's very interesting, his techniques, which we're going to talk about. So this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our guest, John Moran. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our guest today is John Moran, composer, choreographer, theater producer, general madman of very alternative productions. What's interesting about your career, John, is as a youngster, much like myself, who would just go up to anybody I felt like it, at the age of about 20, you go up to Phillip Glass, who's playing in your hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska, give him a tape, and he responds.
He did. He was incredibly kind. It was this thing that everybody told me I was crazy, and it worked. Yeah.
Well, you got to do it. You got to do it. What year was that?
That would have been, my God, 1986 or 87.
All right. So he's already becoming a star at this point.
Yeah. It wasn't like it is today, but he was pretty big.
What's he worth today? Like $60 million?
I have no idea.
I did look that up, and I was pretty impressed or shocked.
Look, when I was investigating you and saw about your initial meeting with him, and it's interesting because he said, he listens halfway to most of the things people give him. He did, at least then. And so do I. I mean, I have to say, people give me stuff, I'm going to at least give it a crack, because you never know what you're going to find there.
And I'm sure they do give you a lot of stuff.
Well, if they can find me.
But it can build up. And then a lot of times people want something. I guess in your case, you kind of wanted something too, right? And he kind of took you, I don't know, under his wing, or he just gave you.
He did. He was. I can't even express how generous he was with me.
Let's go back even earlier than that. So you're in Lincoln, Nebraska. So as an even younger man than 20, what was influencing you? What were you into? What did you want to do? Obviously, you knew you wanted to do something.
Well, partly I was inspired by, first of all, No New York changed my life.
Oh, well, you know what? Don't blame me for your crimes, honey, but thank you very much.
I do. Things like this were a profound influence, and for some reason I could get them all here in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was a weird thing. The residents, I think, said they never sold more records than in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Whoa.
It's where people need stuff.
They needed stuff.
Was there a legendary record store that you would turn to?
There was a record store / head shop called Dirt Cheap. And I worked there one summer.
Whoa, okay. So I mean, the university being there obviously
that's the whole thing.
Helped quite a bit, right?
That's the whole thing, yeah.
But is it true you were like a high school dropout?
I did. I dropped out of. I never went to high school.
But your dad is a dean And you don't go to school?
No, my dad
Naughty.
was the dean of arts and science at the university you mentioned. And so I grew up in an academic environment. There were, what I saw every day were these old parchments of like madrigal music, this totally different style of notation they had. It was, and I used to play the walk-on parts for the kid in the operas at the university.
No, because were these opera productions, were they being made, were the students doing them, or companies coming
Yes.
through? Okay.
It's funny because to me, these seemed like adults, and I think back sometimes now, and these were probably 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, I guess.
Right. Was there were there some legendary composition teachers there or opera singers that were teaching at the university?
Not that I was aware of.
Okay.
I was obsessed with this stuff, and then I was obsessed with Disneyland, which is such an evil word today, but at that time,
Well, John,
it was a
did
different thing.
Did you ever see me at 17 in my Disneyland sweatshirt, which was a total?
Yes.
Oh no! Oh, okay. I see. Now we're getting closer to the truth.
That's it.
I got nothing to.
And so
see.
then later, if you combine Disneyland and opera productions with weed for the first time and LSD, and this is where I'm coming from. And then I dropped out of high school and I joined a Jungian cult that was here.
I somehow actually absolutely knew you were going to say that. But
And so
Where was that? Where was that?
That was in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, that was there too. Okay.
Yeah. This guy had his face tattooed. This was long before tattoos were in vogue. This was many, many years ago. This guy had tattooed another face on top of his face. And
you liked him. You just liked him.
I loved this guy. He was living theater is why I loved it.
All right.
I've never seen somebody so theatrical 24 hours a day.
How old were you when you first took LSD?
Oh, 15.
Mind blowing, I'm sure.
I took mescaline at 12, but hang on, let's go back.
No, you were way.
Well, I was from another planet. I want to talk about your Jungian cult for a minute, but just by asking you, there's a great book where, based on the facts, that Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli meet, and in the middle of their life, and Wolfgang Pauli, there was something called the Pauli effect. You know this
I'm
book?
ashamed to tell you, I don't know this name.
Well, Wolfgang Pauli was a nuclear physicist. Tried to sucker him in to do the Manhattan Project out of Vienna, but for somehow Jung and Pauli came together in the middle of their life and were just kind of analyzing each other. But there was something called the Pauli effect, where he would often be on a train, and if the train stopped, whatever the nearest science lab was nearby, it would stop too. So he had this effect, the Pauli effect. I think it's called
synchronicity.
I'm going to find the title of that book. It's really a great book because
probably
it's
called their last names, like Nixon, Frost.
No, it's got maybe it's decoding the cosmic number. So
I mean,
anyway.
Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity, and that's a synchronicity if I ever heard one.
Oh boy,
exactly.
But I mean, we can, if you're looking for metaphor and connection, I mean, you can always find it. I think it's everything's in front of you, and if you just decide to like take it in and observe, I mean, that's that.
Well, that's why we call it the connective tissue, Tim. So wait, what went down in this Jungian cult?
Well, okay.
Dream analysis?
Yes. At the point of threat every day. And it was a profoundly negative experience. It was threatening and scary.
Whoa.
And they had what they called the hot seat. And when you were,
they were mind fuckers.
Some kind of humiliation.
Just mind fuckers. Yeah. No drugs.
How old were you? How old were you when you were there?
20-ish.
And what did the folks who also were living in Lincoln, what did they think about all this when this was going down?
This guy was legend. As a mind
fucker?
Yes, he had a uniform he wore, and every place that his face didn't have a tattoo, his wife's face did have a tattoo. And I mean, they were famous for saying things like in the grocery checkout when they're getting shit from somebody, he'd say, you have the face of an angel, and that's the face of the devil. And then march away.
Double speak.
Oh, okay. Is this guy still alive?
I think he is. Yeah.
Whoa. And did the authorities ever fuck with him, or he's kind of was a made man of
I
Lincoln?
think maybe at some point. I don't know. They wanted me to commit suicide then. By the end,
Did anyone?
the results of my analysis were that I should commit suicide.
And did they convince anyone else of doing it? Because clearly you did.
I hope not. I don't think so.
Okay.
But they were fucking with me big time. So at the same time, Phillip Glass came through town.
A positive influence.
And he said, "Don't commit suicide. Move in with me."
Well, I threw the I Ching and asked it, "What should I do?" You know, and the I Ching said, "You've met your lifelong teacher. Follow this man."
Whoa.
And so I showed up with an opera I'd written. I ran away from this group. I wrote an opera really fast, and then I harassed Phil basically until.
What was this first opera about?
It was called Parsifal versus Room Number 5. And I don't know that it had a plot. I never finished that one. So then that one got too complicated. So then I wrote this thing called Jack Benny.
Oh yes, I read about that. I still haven't heard it, but and that was stolen a couple of.
It was stolen.
How do you steal an opera? I mean, if it's notated, I don't know.
Well, wait. Let's describe what that was, because the Jack Benny, I don't know whether you call it a performance art, but it was a series of cut-ups from Jack Benny's actual TV monologues.
That's right. I'd been setting this boombox in front of me. We didn't have VCRs back then.
So it's like musique concrète opera?
Yes, it was musique concrète opera. And I took about 50 episodes of this show, the soundtrack of this television show, and I just loved their voices, and they're the same characters every show. So I edited it up a lot and made a new show out of it, like with commercials and the intro and the outro, except inside was just fully weird, just fully bizarre. And I was making loops of action on a tempo out of it.
That would happen on stage.
So was that the Phillip Glass kind of minimalism, like the loops going on?
You know, yes, it was repetition, but it was repetition of stage action.
But
definitely heavily influenced, and by Steve Reich.
So were Steve Reich and Phillip Glass, some little inside gossip, did they hate each other? I mean, they're kind of competing for a lot of the same ideas.
I have to be so careful, but yes,
I know you do.
Allegedly,
you don't.
Yes, allegedly they hated each other.
Neither of them are going to be listening to this nor invited onto the show. Don't worry about that.
I don't make minimalism, nor do I want to, I feel like the masters have done it. So I have no skin in the game. And I have to be honest, at least old Phillip Glass, especially with the synthesizer stuff, I think that's better than Stephen Reich. I just do, personally.
John, so early on, when you were focusing on action repetition, is that when you began to also have, because this is so fascinating to me, that some of your, if not all of your productions have this technique where you actually record the sound or the vocals as well, and people are actually miming
right
in complete perfect timing,
right,
which I don't even know how they do it, to what you've already recorded. So their vocals, the text, the narration is already recorded and they're on stage. So it gives it really this bizarre dimensional thing it's I mean, with the Jack Benny thing, I made this soundtrack literally in my mother's basement, as they say, and I thought, I want to see a visual to this, and I was kind of naive. I'd always thought of it as a visual, looking just like the television show, and then I had this opera thing done that I called it, and I just needed, so I thought, well, we'll just get people that look just like them to lip sync it really precisely and learn it really, so then there'll be a visual. And this group, Ridge Theater, at the time, I met them right when I moved. So it was a whirlwind. I moved to New York. I ended up showing up at Phil's house and saying, well, here I am to be your protege. And he was so, he kind of set me up. And then I met this group, Ridge Theater, and they'd been in New York for like 10 years at that point. And so they provided this visual. So then at the time, this idea of visual theatrical repetition really seemed to hit people over the head. They just hadn't seen it before.
And it was kind of an accident that I had just
or
naively-
intuition.
It's going to be very difficult to work with, especially more than one person, to get them to synchronize. I mean, it's not exactly like lip syncing
No,
because
it's body syncing.
it's body syncing.
And would you, so if there is kind of like loop repetition through action, would you also take it a step further and do phase things where it would not
Yes.
be nice? Okay, so you really dove in deep.
And then what happened was all these critics, I mean, it got all this attention at the time. And it's funny because it was before the internet. And when you got a review, you must remember, when you got a review, you had to wait for the New York Times at midnight and cut it out and go to the Xerox store. And however many copies you made, that's the number of people that would see this review. You know, so it was a different world. But at the time, it was overwhelming. People went nuts. But they all said, you know, oh, this next television show opera, that television show opera. And so they called me the TV composer.
Oh, so you're being typecasted before you could even
Yes.
like really kind of even make your real mark, because that takes time to make your real mark ultimately.
So then I immediately got commissioned by Lincoln Center to
Which,
write.
excuse me, I
Wow,
mean, what fairy
congratulations.
tale did you come
No,
out
this
of?
was
Because this is
insane.
so amazing.
This was
It's-
insane.
And I mean, are
I
you just
was
like,
insane.
are you like, holy shit, or like, of course this is happening?
No, I'm thinking that I'm on a mission from God, because I'm just
Whoa.
this is months before I had run away from this cult, you know, and to me, then thunder is clapping while I'm
the whole angel devil reference, maybe this
Well,
dude is onto something.
Can I ask which god?
Yeah, exactly.
Mission from which god?
I mean, yeah.
So how long did you live with Phillip Glass? Because at least what I read,
Well,
you
Off and on about 10 years.
okay. Wow. And when was the last time
More
you
than
spoke?
I've lived
When
with
was the
any
last
of
time you
my
guys-
more than I've lived with any of my lovers. My God, a marathon man.
No, we're having the hugest feud now. It's been
You
years.
are.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
no. Is that well? I don't need to know the details.
I'm not even going to go into it.
You don't
because-
have to. And he's like half the year in like Nova Scotia or something like that.
Something,
Or
probably, yes.
well, I also heard that the rumor has it around town. We're in New York that the before Lou Reed died, the kind of once a year, twice a year power lunch was Lou Reed, Paul Simon, Phillip Glass, and Henry Kissinger.
It
The
sounds
the
disgusting.
floor would bro down. I mean, it's
Well,
believable.
I find that hard to believe.
Well,
Somehow.
I have some inside info, but you never know.
Okay. All right. I find a lot of things happening today were hard to believe.
There you go. There you
10
go.
years
Um,
ago.
Right.
Well,
Well,
let me just take a next step.
Please.
So I didn't want to be the TV composer, right? So this record company got me this huge collection of professional sound effects.
amazing.
You know,
From-
everything's separate. And
like
so I
Foley?
wanted, yeah, Foley.
Okay.
So,
all right.
so I wanted to recreate the same sensation from this Jack Benny thing, but I decided I'm never going to record a television or a movie again. I'm never going to record anybody else's work to make the same effect. So I started recreating. So that started about a 10-year process where I'm trying to recreate reality as closely as I can from individual tiny sounds. It's like impressionist painting, but instead of little dabs of paint, it's little tiny sound effects.
Didn't Stockhausen with the his early tape pieces kind of do that with the stacking different waves and you have these
Yes.
composites?
Yes, but his stuff always sounds like
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
and I love it.
I love
But,
it. Yeah.
but I was trying to back then. This is still before personal computers when this was starting, and I was trying to imagine some kind of a virtual reality, which was very influenced by Disneyland. I mean, Disneyland. I'm talking about the techniques of the animatronics and the way they
Oh,
actually,
yes.
you know, that each of these robot animatronic scenes is looping,
Yep.
and you are
Like Chuck E. Cheese, like Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes, but you are moving through them. And when you see a story play out, it's because you have multiple instances of the same characters in a progression that are all looping, and you move through them. And I remember thinking, well, this is this is time, and at some level that I can't understand. So then I started trying to recreate those realities, and I'm looping them and dissecting them and making musical structures out of a simulated reality. And the reason that you have to use all these different little sound effects instead of just recording something is that I want the nuances of everything to fall on a tempo. And I like to make works where every part of a work will work in perfect counterpoint to any other part of a work. And you can do that if you have a unified tempo between all the moments.
Sure.
Which life does not have in
Oh, I don't
reality.
know.
I mean,
In reality.
life is that all these things moving at independent
Well,
rates. I mean, that's how I hear it when I step out the
moving
door.
at independent,
Yeah.
moving at independent rates, and by the way, there is a lot of repetition, but also there's different schisms that one can fall into, and also I'm just thinking conversationally. I'm thinking about, for instance, Tim and I are grand loudmouths, and I'm always fascinated when somebody who has great things to say but delivers them in one sentence paragraphs. That's just such a different tempo that is often necessary to interrupt the lava flow from big mouths like us.
That's one
Way of
thing
putting
that.
it.
So in other words, Lydia, you like basically the equivalent of a text oboe, like it slices through the room, or you know, a bunch of words. It's basically the oboe of words, which is like a monologue.
Tim, I am often the oboe of to your words. So correct. But I consider it a fucking butcher knife or a riding crop. Let's not forget a few nights ago. Thank you very much. Anyway,
All
back
right.
to you, John.
So
I'm just listening to your tempos. To be honest.
Yeah, things moving at different rates. Well, you know, we're doing that. We're doing counterpoint all the time. We kind of know each other's little dance, and it just kind of falls into place. Animatronics. Have you seen this stuff on YouTube where people will get used Chuck E. Cheese animatronics setups, and they'll put them in their yard, and then they'll play like heavy metal. You know, it's like not a little banal, but people will do homemade little gigs that they'll get, like basically a Chuck E. Cheese being shut down. Like I'll take those and create concerts with the music they choose through these used animatronic puppet things.
I haven't seen. Yeah.
One of my concepts.
All right.
I'm doing it now, and this will disrupt the natural flow of any tempo, is because the space between words and perhaps the space between a footstep is where the power or the interest lies.
It's everything.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
also,
Yes.
I like to skewer that space, as I'm just doing as an example. As somebody who can rat-a-tat-tat, no problem, no biggie. Just saying. It's a very important thing. And that's why I can also understand why you were given these individual sounds as opposed to recording them, because then there they are for your immaculate placement.
And you can pick, I mean, the timbre of a sound is everything. And the musicality, the melody and the rhythm, the internal melodies and rhythms, you know, are
You're talking about like beats within timbre. I mean, when I think of the alchemy of music, it's the timbre. I mean, you can notate all this other stuff so accurately, but then the intuition is the timbre. And then when you get to composite timbre, forget it. I mean, like Stravinsky, whether you like him or not, he was a master of timbre. He just kind of maybe even intuitively knew what the shit was going to fucking sound like.
He was the protege of Rimsky-Korsakov. And when I was a kid, I read this book, The Art of Orchestration by Rimsky-Korsakov. That's all about timbre. And like for him, it was a shocking idea that the kettle drums could sound like cannon fire and a flute like a bird. Like in his way, he's trying to reference reality, which was revolutionary. And then Stravinsky, like to the extreme. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm curious, when you're dealing with all these Foley sounds, you must have been mixing and matching. So the composites of Foley, I mean, I guess you don't know that until you just start fucking doing it. And so were there any epiphanies, or just kind of you just stored it in your mind, like, well, this sounds cool like this, and this, and also what makes you choose what timbres at what point? Did you have a system like I mean, serialists have systems? Are there systems that you would put in and you put these things in place, or is it kind of step by step and going with just your gut?
That's a really good question. I don't know how to answer it. I do know, I was just thinking the other day, when you try to write a scene down with this kind of work, with the sound effects, when you just try to write it down in advance, it's never going to work, because it's all about the sound of that doorknob, the sound of those steps, the sound of that influence the scene. And, you know, so for a long time, I made fantasy works out of this, you know, like stuff from kind of Tim Burton-esque worlds, but very musically oriented. And then the last years, I've done what I call portraiture, where I record actual people and I get them to sit down and we talk, and I ask them, remember when you came in, and you'd say, what would you say? Hi, John, the radiator's broken, whatever thing. And I get them to say it 20 times, and one of them is going to be so them. And then I use that one, and then I get them and I build up lots of dialogue. And then in my mind, I recreate the situations I remember them in. I pick the footsteps that sound like theirs. And it's not, I mean, each footstep is separate and each scuff. So what I'm doing is I'm composing rhythms that are in counterpoint with the voice, say, in their environment, but I'm actually trying to recreate something very realistic and specific, and so then you have a composition of realism, and the way, and I try to investigate then perception. So a lot of times I've kind of called it the music of perception, and I'm trying to, like, and like Lydia was saying, that the space between a word or an event is everything. If you got your timing off, it goes by unnoticed. Like nobody will notice, but if you get your timing just right, the most mundane little thing can feel profound.
And that takes a lot of work for that to sound natural. I mean, it takes a lot of synthesis to create a natural feeling. And then strangely, often when it's more natural and you kind of don't put in the work, it seems more synthetic. It's bizarre how that falls like that. And basically your approach in terms of like pop producers, you're kind of more of a Mutt Lange as opposed to a Ted Templeman, which is like, hey, we'll just capture it and go with it, where it's like a million fucking takes, and well, not a million
takes.
And then till you get the one takes. That one where
even when you get it right, do it again, because there's going to be another time where that minute difference in timing is going to make everything, you know.
As a contrarian, I'm just interjecting this into the mix. I consider myself in many things a one take artist.
Real minimalism.
Also, no, I'm not looking for perfection, but it always happens to be that way. And the other thing is, as somebody who practices verbal hypnosis, this is again why the space, especially a more awkward or unnatural space, you can really get people to almost hallucinate something that you haven't said, or that maybe you thought, or maybe you want them to think, or maybe they'll just lose track of what you're saying because you're just generally hypnotizing them with your tongue.
Well, going back before you went into the kind of basically when you started explaining your process, going back to timbre, kind of, I think it was in between the timbre to that, is what a lot of composers miss when they get so locked down in the, I guess, the process is, at the end of the day, does it sound good? And a lot of people miss that. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, does it fucking sound good? And that's so subjective. It's so subjective, but it's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of going off to a different direction, but
no, it's true. And like what Lydia was saying is also so true. I mean, there's really different ways of working. And a lot of times when I've almost been forced to encounter other groups with my work, like when they made me go to Harvard with it, I really didn't want to. and they basically made me do this.
Who's they?
Harvard.
Harvard made you go to
Harvard.
Harvard.
There was
Fine.
Another
was a-
hostage situation.
There was a guy named Robert Brustein, who was
Christian Wolf teaching there for a second?
maybe.
All
I
right.
don't know.
All right.
I was pressured into going there,
And you hated it.
and they hated me. I mean,
Well, that's
these
fine.
I think it's
Shakespearean
always
actors,
it's always a great sign, especially when the academies hate you.
these Shakespearean actors had never been more insulted in their lives. At the
Oh my
idea
God. So
that they,
precious.
and I could kind of understand, you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
I
they
could
need to be
kind of-
insulted.
I mean, you know who loves doing my work are dancers. Dancers do the work, and a lot of times the voices maybe aren't theirs.
Dancers always love singing my songs. Not.
I've been working with a dancer. I've been working with dancers recently, which I've really enjoyed. I mean, the word is going back to Stravinsky, the notorious debut riots had nothing to do with the music or Picasso's background art, but it was the choreography that was so offensive to people because because the actual piece was played in isolation just weeks later with it was huge success. And little fun history fact.
I didn't know that.
The reduction for two pianos. Do you know who performed it? When I think
No.
it was Stravinsky on one piano and an older Debussy on the other piano.
No,
yes,
shit.
yeah.
Can you imagine?
I mean, Paris at the time was pretty happening until
Yeah,
those Germans came in.
Yeah.
That changed it.
Paris is one of the places that I won't go back to.
What happened?
I lived there a few different times, and it just
I
didn't
find it
work.
very annoying.
It just didn't work. It just
Just like a
didn't work.
museum of the past. It just doesn't feel
Your music
fresh enough.
Your work, it is not theater. It is not dance. It is
Oh,
not
that
music.
shit. Oh, that
It
shit.
is nothing.
Ooh. Did you
It's
did,
okay? You know, okay. Settle
did you get to
down.
meet Boulez when you were there? Did you get to hang with Boulez?
No,
at all?
but he kept me from getting funded
Ah!
because there was a thing. I mean, it was really you have to be approved by him if you're going to get.
Oh yeah,
any-
he was kind of he was kind of running the show, right?
And I like
John,
Boulez.
no
I mean-
reason to return.
Well,
There are
you know-
places
Yeah.
that want you.
Superstars will hog the resources. It happens all the fucking time, and
Yeah.
that's they want to
Well-
hold. They want it all.
It's funny. We were talking about mentors. I got a letter last night from this young guy. I guess he's in Poland. He's a composer. And he wanted to ask, he had all these very serious questions. I found you and I need to ask, is having a mentor important? And, here's a list of 5 questions I need answered. And, they're epic stuff, and I always thought, when because I didn't go to school, but I used to go to the university and I used to pore over these scores by crazy composers like Stockhausen and try to understand these scores they had in the music library. And, I always thought that I wanted to do work for some kid like that someday who this meant everything to,
So that's flattering. That's flattering.
It is. It's a circle, and it's nice.
How good is the music library at University of Nebraska?
Surprisingly good.
Right, I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you some of your descriptions? I mean, were you in touch with like the whole Robert Ashley, Alvin Lucier crowd?
No, you know who
Gordon
was
Muma?
You know who was my good buddy was Allen Ginsberg for a long time.
Yep.
And he mentored me in this, and he took it very seriously. And he would name all these names. I'd never heard of any of them. And he would say to Phil, really upset, we have a young man who doesn't know his history. How can you move forward when you don't know your history? And I was, Alan, I'm 23,
Was he kind of jabbing? Was he flirting? What was going on when he would say that?
Well, he was, okay. The first time I met him, I had hepatitis and I'd come home. I went to Phil's from this tour we were on and I collapsed in this chair and Alan came over and was giving me a neck rub. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is,
This is where this Notorious is where he's making his move.
I'm going to vomit, because of the hepatitis. And he whispers in my ear, he says, I just came from a meeting of the Man-Boy Love Association.
Oh, yeah. He loved that. Nambla, he loved that thing.
He loved it. And then I'll tell you, after that moment, he would flirt, but it was just like, what's he gonna do? He was
you were probably too old for him by that point anyway.
Probably. He was so old. It's like, this was no threat. This was a guy who would shout in the airport security that he loves marijuana. And I just loved that stuff about him. I loved how shocking he was. And then once you were alone, he'd just drop it. And it was really kind of an angry lecture most of the time. You don't know this, you don't know this.
Well, the thing is, you could have lectured him on composers and opera. I don't know who he was trying to lecture you on, poets and writers.
Yeah, I don't even, to be honest, I'm ashamed that I don't even remember these names that are flying by.
Well, so he would lecture, but he was also sounding like he was fun. He wasn't like a stick in the mud.
He was a classic archetype of the wise old man. And I'll tell, one time, some friend of his had died. And again, I'm ashamed. I don't remember who it was. It was probably someone who changed writing in some way. And I said, I'm trying to be philosophical. We're walking down the street, and I said, he was pretty old. He was probably ready to die. And Alan turned on me and scolded, nobody is ready to die. Everybody has things that they are going to leave uncompleted, and he just really, and I'll tell you, he would, he's right. And I think of him every day. I think of him like when I'm feeling I need to complete something for my posterity, blah, 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 blah. I think of him saying, you're not going to be ready. And it's heavy.
Well, my philosophy is more, if you're not ready to die every day, you're not really living.
And you know what was so weird about him? He was ready to die. He had a party. And
I'm all for pre-funerals. Yeah.
No, and I came in and he had no reason to. This is not to toot my horn. He had no reason. He made a big deal about me. Here comes the future and all this stuff. And it just touched me.
That's flattering.
Another death story.
Cool.
Do you remember Arthur Russell?
Well, that was another. He was in the same clique with Ginsberg.
They were next door neighbors, him and Alan. And Arthur was a profound influence on me and so many people. And I, for many years, thought of Arthur as a forgotten genius. And this was a great source of depression for me. If Arthur Russell could be, and there's a kicker to it later, but if Arthur Russell could be forgotten and never had really finished anything in a way, holy shit, what are we doing? And Arthur was dying of AIDS, and I'm 23, 24, and he's living in the apartment above or below Alan. And Alan is on the phone yelling at me, come over here and say goodbye to Arthur Russell. And I couldn't. I was terrified. I didn't know Arthur very well, just from around, and I thought, he doesn't want to see me. And Alan was yelling at me. But I said, tell him he's my favorite composer. And Alan's super pissed. You tell him yourself. You get over here. And I'll tell you what, I didn't go.
Well, listen, don't beat yourself up over that. I mean, that's facing death, whether it's your own death or someone else. It's not so easy. So I wouldn't beat yourself up, but you love this guy. So it's
and 20 years later, we're performing at Oxford University or somewhere in England. And a kid comes up to me and says, out of the blue, have you ever heard of Arthur Russell? I'm super. And it was like, yes, this Arthur did it.
Yeah. And there's been, he's kind of has a, I don't know.
It's kind of died down again.
Now. Yeah.
But about 5-6 years ago,
yes, there's a documentary.
Huge, yeah. And great.
Now on the other side of town, there's another gay guy who is in the composition world that hated all of them. His name is Charles Warren. And he was always, oh, that's horrible music. Although he was a serialist. He was very modern and all that stuff. I just wonder if they just didn't get along as people. I mean, I don't know what was going on.
Probably, yes.
I think that's what it was. I mean, composers, they love to butt heads. And of course, Charles Warren commissioned a opera for of Brokeback Mountain, a serialist Brokeback Mountain, and basically Levine.
That's hard hitting subject matter.
Well, Levine was going to produce it at the Met, but it kind of funding fell apart, and then it was produced in Spain, but the whole thing didn't really come together. I kind of want to see it though.
I kind of want to see the serialist rendition of Magic Mike starring Channing Tatum and Matthew McConaughey, because I must say I did love the original with or without music. Just had to slip that one in. How did you come to work with?
That sounds like, remember Spider-Man? What was that famous Spider-Man? Something of the Dark.
I never saw it.
I don't.
It took like 10 years for them to make that musical, and it was this huge. It never really opened.
I think that the untalented Bono had something to do with that.
Yes, he did.
That's all I know. So, how did you come to? How and why did you come to work with Iggy Pop? Or was that the Manson opera?
It was. That was the one that came after this Jack Benny one, and I decided no more. Oh, because they were saying television show. How about I Love Lucy? How about this? And Jack Benny had been delightful. This delightful avant-garde trip into the, and then so I thought, okay.
I would have said the Red Skelton Show.
That would have actually been a good one.
That would have been a good one.
George and Gracie were up there.
You can't beat the Honeymooners because you just can't beat our
Honeymooners. Actually, we were planning a Honeymooners opera. I was going to have him hang himself in the kitchen.
I'd kind of pull that out of your head, John.
It wouldn't hold, but yeah, that would have been
exactly.
a good one.
But I learned more about theater acting from Jackie Gleason than just about any source.
I'm sure.
Across Europe, I've taken like a 5-minute clip of Jackie Gleason, and we can spend a whole day.
Well, it's amazing with it. You can tell the real difference between the television actors of the classic shows, who was really coming from the theater, and who was just I'm on TV now, because it would just be so much more animated. And Sorrel Book, of course, one of my favorites, who played Boss Hogg and Dukes of Hazzard. He has a doctorate from Yale in Shakespearean drama. I mean, this guy was
I believe it.
Oh no, he really knew Shakespeare.
Herman Munster. Fred Gwynn was a master as Herman Munster. This guy was. Well, okay.
All right, let's go on to the.
So speaking of,
how about the Iggy Pop? So how did that come about, and what was? I mean, probably it was the best thing he has done since, because the first Stooges albums, I kind of fell off after Lust for Life.
Jim Osterberg.
Stop the music, Jim.
Is a nice guy. He was really nice.
Was he still alive?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I don't see him anymore.
Okay.
He's enthusiastic.
Yeah, he was very fun, and it was a trip to be hanging around with him.
I mean, nothing tops the first Stooges albums. Let's just get that on the table. I mean, that's just the beginning of the beginning. There you go. You don't get better than that.
When I knew him, he was 40, which seemed ancient to me. I remember thinking 40. Oh, fuck. And he would say 40. I'm fucking 40. I'm fucking 40. It's just like he was in a loop about it.
What year was that? Was the Manson family?
That would have been 90, 91.
Yeah. And what about Uma Thurman? How did she narrated one of your?
She did Book of the Dead, which was then in 2000 at the Public Theater. Yeah.
I ran into her once.
She also was a very nice person.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I ran into her at the passport office, the expedited.
Really?
Yeah, we both had to get a passport renewed really quickly.
I think it's kind of interesting that I have no idea why they were a couple, but Ethan Hawke, who never was anything, but then in the last 10 years was Theatrical Life, has actually done some interesting things.
He's not bad, is he? He's done
some kind of interesting things. Yeah. Just connecting the dots. How was COVID for you then? First of all, when did you go back to Nebraska?
Okay.
And I don't blame you for going anywhere. I mean, I constantly want to go somewhere else.
in 2008, I left the US to go on a tour, and I just never came back. And I just lived, I decided I had just had it with America.
Full gypsy. You went full gypsy.
I went full gypsy, and I lived nomadically. I mean, I never really lived anywhere, but I could, if I changed continents every 3 months.
Okay. Did you hit all the continents?
A lot of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Not Antarctica.
No,
Okay.
no,
Well,
not all of them. You know, all the time I tell people, oh, I've lived all over the world. And some young kid goes, did you live there?
Sub-Saharan Africa.
Live there. Well, then you haven't lived all over
Yeah.
there.
So did you? That's cool. You should have it in your repertoire. You slap a kid across the face when they do that, since it's such a regular thing.
Let's talk about nomadism for a while,
Yeah,
because I was a nomad for quite a long time. I mean, not that long ago. And
I want to hear about it.
Well, I mainly was meeting these female artists that had all, it was kind of like the way that the Beat Generation were nomadic and traveling around and writing about what they did. And then suddenly there were like 4 or 5 female artists I had met, and they were all like, I don't want to live anywhere. I'm nomadic. And I'm like, I was living in Spain at the time. But then after Spain, I didn't want to live anywhere either. I wanted to live, but, and it's like, and sometimes I think that, especially if you're a writer or composer, sometimes there's nothing like mobility. Sometimes you just have to be a nomad. I mean, you just have to do. I mean, I always moved all the time anyway, every 2 to 4 years or whatever. And I guess after living in Spain, I've lived in Barcelona longer than anywhere. I just wanted to keep moving for a while.
And I always needed some new show just to literally have something to eat. And so it was like, if I go there next, I'll get $1,000. And then a month later, if I can gig up a thing over there, you know.
Well, I mean, we have to be geographical divinators, because when you're as weird as we are, that's what you have to do. I mean, that's my thing. One of my greatest talents is just that, like, geographically, where can you place whatever you want to do now? And you have to find what those places are. It's not always the same place.
And you know what else? The world is way more than New York. And I remember for 30 years, I said to myself, I'll never leave New York. And if I leave New York, that'll mean I didn't make it. And then this time I finally went away. I just said, because I was on tour with this dancer, and I just turned her, I'm not going back.
I lived in New York. I've lived in New York less than I've lived everywhere else. People just think I've always been in New York. I mean, I left New York in 1979.
Where did you go?
I went.
Where was the first place that you were overseas?
Well, no, first I went to Los Angeles, then I went to London for a few years, then I came back to New York, and then I just continued. New Orleans, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, Barcelona.
That very first time you're outside of the US.
Oh, no, I started touring Europe in 78 or 9 because
and
I
how
knew.
Old were you?
Underage, probably.
That is so cool.
Well, I knew that was the future of where weirdos like us had to go. It's like, what I was amazed that there weren't that many bands from, the scene I was in that actually could make it over to Europe. But I'm just like, I'm going to Europe. I'm going to Europe.
Right.
I kept going to Europe because I knew I would have to keep going to Europe. And you're going to Europe again in a couple of weeks.
4 weeks.
Where are you going?
Back to Germany, where
I'll be in Germany too. Maybe we can meet.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
And so what's the project?
Where do you live? Where do you live?
Well, I live there, but mostly Dresden and Leipzig.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I love Leipzig.
Yeah,
Dresden's got one of the best Philharmonic or whatever orchestras in the world. I mean, it's such a unique.
And Dresden has Hellerau, Center for European Arts, which is just amazing. And so Joseph Keckler and I are going to make a movie about Hellerau. And this place, this kind of, how do I call it, an artist commune called Zentralwerk in Dresden, which has this huge history. I mean, it was a slave labor camp during the Holocaust, and now it's my art studio and where all my best friends live, and they got a 100-year lease.
So it's an established post-squat.
It's a post-squat that got established, and they
fantastic.
Yeah.
As you can in Europe. Europe.
And I'll tell you, after these small gigs all over Europe and all over Asia, and for 10 years. Now I'm better funded in Dresden than I am in,
Well,
you
that's
know.
that's believable. Yes.
I mean, hello.
As an American
obviously.
citizen,
Yeah.
how does that work as an American citizen to get?
It's really complicated.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, another thing about being nomadic in if you're doing original music, original art, especially for, let's be honest, not a huge audience, and that audience also happens to be, they're kind of connoisseurs of something that's very maybe esoteric to the general public's eyes. You can't play this shit for the same people in the same town over and over again. All this stuff that
Exactly.
requires a lot of effort and work on your behalf.
Exactly.
They'll check it once or twice and like, I liked it, I didn't like it, and they move on. They can't be like, here it is again and again. So you have to find other fucking places.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So, and I let me ask you this too, John, because of the way COVID has shut so much down.
Yeah.
That I guess making a movie makes sense. I was very fortunate that my documentary that Beth made came out when it did, because even though cinemas were still funded and weren't closed down in Europe, and I could go in for after the first year and a half, I could go and show that a lot of other performance spaces or clubs were just not happening. And I always think it's good to have, a variety of mediums, formats to be juggling, because we're basically jugglers at the end of the day.
Yeah. I always wanted my operas to be films, actually. Or it's funny, I still say film, but for cinema.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very much for documenting as chronically.
But I remember
chronic documenter.
When I first started trying to document, it was always like having to come up with money we didn't have to pay the one person who really knew how to do this. And they had all this power and they could decide, I'm very busy.
Right.
And so it's changed now. So documentation is important. Yeah.
So when you were in Darmstadt, was this going back to Germany?
That was the first time I went one of the first times I lived in Germany was in Darmstadt long time ago.
Were you invited to the whole Darmstadt school, that whole tradition?
No, the Staatstheater Darmstadt did one of my operas, and I went there, and I didn't even know of this school at the time. I wish I did. No, I wish I did.
Whoa. So just randomly you end up in Darmstadt as a composer, and has nothing to do with it.
Excuse me, but I've never even heard of the town. So could you fill us less musically inclined to please tell us what that is?
Just south of Frankfurt. And, after World War II, I'm going to sort of get this right. After World War II, United States, unlike what France and England did to Germany after World War I, where they're like, fuck you, now you owe us. America's kind of like, maybe we should first we're going to take their military away, but then we're going to maybe encourage their culture. So they created this, basically our own Pentagon, or our country created this composition center. In the West. And it was also the Cold War at that point. So it's like, look what we've got. And look what you got. It's
funny because then Dresden, now this is the East. And this was this whole different culture under GDR, under the Soviets. And so they come from this. And so it's really funny. The East and the West in Germany, maybe not today as much, but traditionally have a different mindset. The East is much more anti-capitalism. They were used to poverty or living simple, you could say,
Totally. And there's still a lot of villages that you can really feel that there to this day.
You can drive half an hour out of Dresden or Leipzig and be in a medieval town.
Well, Lydia and I played in one of those. I forget where it was.
Well, we've played in Leipzig a few times.
Well, but not Leipzig. It's one of these small towns because Germany's trying to flood arts money into a lot of these smaller.
Yeah, no, the crazy thing is these towns have money for art.
Well, because
they love it.
Sure, but we went there. Her agent Sabine booked us, and we were like, that was the one where that opening band where the guy was mixing single malt scotch with Diet Coke backstage.
I had no recollection.
And
The last thing I'm going to remember is what somebody else is drinking.
When was
the guy
was
made me
this-
furious, so that's why I remember. Anyhow, it doesn't really matter.
I
But
have no
I wish
idea
I
when
could
it
see
was
that
or
show.
where it was.
going back to Darmstadt, so you had Boulez and Stockhausen and Zanakis, so they're all kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of promoted and encouraged there, and there's a whole tradition in Darmstadt of just the Western highbrow music.
Well, we needed that information for us curious non-musicians.
I mean, if you do opera, I mean, did you get to see any of the Stockhausen's later operas with like modules and guitars and all this
No,
stuff?
I never saw a Stockhausen piece live.
Okay,
No.
all right. Oh,
That's a shame. Come to
I
think of it.
have, yeah, totally, yes. So you're going back when?
In 4 weeks, actually.
And so what's on the horizon?
So Joseph Keckler and I are making a movie about one of the last times I saw Joseph was in 2008, and I promised him this big aria at the end of this piece. And I kept telling him, I'll get to it. You know, I'm such a good I can just write it down. You know, I've got to deal with the dancers and all this stuff first. And this went on. We had like 2 months to make this thing. This went on, and it's about opening night. And I'm like, you know, I'm sorry I haven't written this down yet, you know. And then I'll do it tonight. And then I have writer's block, and I'm sitting there because there's way too much pressure. And so Joseph had to go out there for his big aria, like with almost nothing. And I'm like telling him, just do something, just use your voice.
So he improvised an
He
aria.
improvised, and it
wow.
was, yeah.
Did you take
And
full credit?
Yeah. We both kind of put the credit on each other that night. And so the premise of this movie is that he's touring in Leipzig, and I come there, and I decide I need to finish this aria, and we have 24 hours. And this is so stupid, this premise, but then it gets pretty weird what happens then over the next.
Well, between the two of you, I can only expect grand weirdness.
So that's who introduced us, Joseph Keckler.
Well, now I put that to I'm inarticulate, but I put that together a while ago. But yes, cool.
Okay, well, you've been on my radar for a while, but yes. And again, you know, it's wonderful because this is all an extended circle. It does have connections. We meet on whatever plane we meet whenever we meet, whether it's this plane or another astral plane. And then eventually the people that you're supposed to know, they come together.
You know, I always find this experience. I've met so many people, and so much of the time it's a very private kind of experience. I used to get letters from the Manson family. Like, you know, Susan Atkins used to write me every week for years. Just these sweet letters. What did you do today? Today I did this. And, you know, and then I see all this stuff, you know, you see her picture everywhere. And like, that was a friend of mine, strangely, after the opera, you know, she loved it. And she loved the Manson family opera. And then like, I'm in Jack Benny's autobiography that's published by somebody. Like, it just mentions me, like one sentence. It's nothing, but you know, I grew up, you know, and listening to Lydia, and then it's, you know, hello,
and then we're here.
And it's just funny that you were talking at the beginning about life. I can't remember what you said, but life is a poetry, you said, kind of, and it is a poetry.
And I can't think of a better way to end this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and John Moran. Off soon to do his next monster piece in Germany. Much success, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much.